case, if you get chosen on this case, would you be able to keep that case outside of the courtroom and just rely on the evidence and the law that you hear here?
Yes.
Because I suspect that that other case was probably a civil case, and the law in a civil case is substantially different than a criminal case. So when you hear the law from the judge, you rely on this law and not something you heard years ago. You can do that, can't you?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for explaining that.
Lastly, you answer whether or not you want to be on this jury, and you say you're not sure, and you give a valid reason. In this case, being a juror in this case will carry a heavy burden of responsibility. Do you want to serve on the case, or not sure? I guess now is the time you make up your mind.
Okay, counsel, you may answer. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I have had the benefit of living a long life. I feel very blessed that I am healthy and can still participate in our society meaningfully. And so in that respect, I would feel honored to serve on the jury. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you, ma'am. We'll pass this jury, Your Honor.
Mr. Frank?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Juror
morning.
57. I will second what Mr. Gray said about thank you for being patient with us and coming back a second time this morning. I also, it's so refreshing. It's so good to hear people who have already served jury duty twice and still feel it's an honor to do it again. So thank you. It's not an easy process, and we appreciate people who do take it seriously. So thank you. With regard to the other cases, one was dismissed during the middle of the trial, it sounds like, right?
Yes.
Do you remember if that was civil or criminal?
No, I don't remember.
And really, whether they are civil or criminal, as Mr. Gray said, the bottom line question is, if you're a juror here, you got to set aside what you learned there and apply just the law that Judge Chu gives to you for this case.
Yes.
And you think you'd have any difficulty doing that?
No.
Sounds like those were back a ways in time as well.
Yes.
All right. You talked about the trauma that brought attention to Minneapolis, and it sounds like, well, you recognize that some good and bad to that, the events that led to that kind of attention. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
Some of the demonstrations, do you think had some positives to them?
I believe that it is a good time for us as a society to examine these issues that were brought forth by these events, and it's really an important time to look at these issues.
And do you think that recognizing your duty as a juror is just what happens in this courtroom.
Yes.
Okay. So you have no difficulty setting aside sort of experiences from before this year and just focusing on your job as a juror if you're selected.
No.
I think you rather candidly and understandably expressed, sadness for really both sides of this. You probably already told us this, but to be able to set those emotions aside if you were a juror and selected in this case and decided only on the evidence.
Yes.
And, like what happens to a person's career is you can answer the question then.
Could you restate it?
Yeah. So, that sadness over what happens to a person's career is not part of the evidence, may not be part of the evidence that, is part of the trial.
You're right. Yes.
And
I
you could,
agree with that.
and if it's not evidence in the trial, you can set that emotion
Yes.
aside.
Yes.
There was that chart of responses, I agree and disagree. Do you remember that? It was some time ago you had to answer this.
Are you referring to a specific?
In the questionnaire, there.
No, right, I remember that section, yes.
You indicated that the question was, I do not trust the police, and you said you somewhat disagree. So do you remember why you chose somewhat disagree there about do not trust the police?
Well, I generally trust the police, but there are occasions when we cannot trust the police.
They're people too. Is that fair?
Pardon me?
They are people too.
Right.
Obviously, this case involves a police officer. You think you can be a fair and impartial juror in a case involving a police officer's actions?
Yes.
If you can excuse me for just a moment, Your Honor, may I have a moment, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Juror 57, Your Honor. That's all the questions I have, and we would pass the juror for those.
You're going to be on this jury. We're going to start December 8th, and you will get a call from the jury office to confirm the time and the date, but that's what we expect will happen. All right?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Have a great rest of the day. All right.
Judge, are the jurors told not to read the news? Because there was an article this morning that was quite extensive in the Minneapolis paper about jurors and who's an alternate and who isn't. And they really shouldn't know that.
Yeah. They're told they've been told before, and I think when they go through orientation, they're told again. They're told both in writing and orally. But, I'll make sure if you still have concerns, I warn them not to look at any newspaper articles about the case or whatever. But,
I understand.
yeah,
As far as I've been told, it's,
yeah. But, I think it was reported what the practice is in Hennepin County on alternates, so. Okay, are you ready for the next juror? Okay. Thank you, Deputy. Oh, yes, that's right, we're doing the panel. Okay, we have fresh ones. Counsel, I know you probably slipped. No first names, please. Do not use first names. I think you called your client Kim. So please refrain from doing that. Okay?
well, at least it wasn't here.
True.
It's getting better.
Right, please be seated. Good morning, members of the jury panel. I'm Regina Chu, and I'll be the presiding judge in this case. I want to start out by saying thank you. Thank you for interrupting your normal routine. Thank you for fulfilling such an important civic obligation. You know, we're living in really trying times, so it is with extra heartfelt appreciation from the entire justice system for your appearing and responding to your jury summonses. Upholding the rights that we cherish, the right to a trial by jury and the right to a speedy trial in trying, unusual times is the American way. You validate these constitutional rights by appearing today and by proving your willingness to serve. You jurors really are our heroes. You are ordinary people who are called upon to do extraordinary work to make sure that our justice system moves forward, even in the midst of a pandemic. You are upholding the Constitution, the very foundation of our democracy, and we could not do this without you. Now, not all of us can serve in the military, but we all can do our civic duty by serving as jurors. Our justice system would not work without good citizens like you. I'm saying thank you again because I really can't say thank you enough. All right, as you know, this is a criminal case in which the state of Minnesota has charged the defendant, Kimberly Potter, with the following charges. Count 1 is first-degree manslaughter predicated on reckless use or handling of a firearm. That count alleges that on or about April 11, 2021, in Brooklyn Center, Hennepin County, Minnesota, defendant Kimberly Ann Potter caused the death of Daunte Demetrius Wright while committing the misdemeanor offense of reckless handling or use of a firearm, so as to endanger the safety of another with such force and violence that death or great bodily harm to any person was reasonably foreseeable. Count 2 alleges second-degree manslaughter, and that count alleges that on or about April 11, 2021, in Brooklyn Center, Hennepin County, Minnesota, defendant Kimberly Ann Potter caused the death of Daunte Demetrius Wright by her culpable negligence, whereby Kimberly Potter created an unreasonable risk and consciously took a chance of causing death or great bodily harm to Daunte Demetrius Wright while using or possessing a firearm. The defendant has pleaded not guilty. That plea denies the charges and places upon the state of Minnesota the burden of proving defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The state is represented by Mr. Matt Frank, Ms. Erin Eldridge, Mr. Josh Larson, and Mr. Raul Shah. The defendant is represented by Mr. Earl Gray, Mr. Paul Ing, and Ms. Amanda Montgomery. And I want to introduce you to a couple of other people that will play critical roles in this case. You've already met my staff, but my law clerk is Mr. Zach Kramer, and my judicial clerk is Ms. Jessica Bauer. Mr. Kramer and Ms. Bauer are responsible for taking care of all administrative matters. If you need to get a message to me of a personal nature, please let my staff know, and they'll make sure the message gets to me. Seated in front of me is Ms. Carly Davis. She is a certified court reporter that is responsible for taking down all the testimony and keeping a formal record of the proceedings. This means that when you respond to questions, you must speak loudly and clearly so that our court reporter can make an accurate record. Also, because the court reporter is taking down everything that is said in the courtroom, if you have to answer orally with the excuse me, with a yes or a no instead of shaking your head. And please don't say uh-huh and in response to questions, because that doesn't make for a clear record. A couple of logistics before we get started on jury selection. As you know, masks are required at all times. The only time that you may remove your mask is when you are in the witness box being questioned by me and the attorneys. Now, let me give you an idea of what jury selection is going to look like. There'll be group questioning that I will do, and then individual questioning. During group questions, I will ask you to raise your hand or not raise your hand in response to my questions. An oral response is not required nor asked for. Then, after I'm done with my group questions, I will question you individually. I know all of you have filled out a rather lengthy questionnaire. The individual questioning is expected to be very short. I'll just have some follow-up questions to some of the answers in your questionnaire. And after I get done, the attorneys may have some questions for you also. When we do individual questioning, I will do you one at a time, and I will dismiss the other jurors to the waiting room. Okay? Please know that we can't always control the temperature in the courtroom consistently, so dress in layers. You're allowed to bring something into the courtroom to drink as long as it has a cap on it. All right? Now, delays. I know that you're taking time out of your daily life to be here, so I try to keep the delays as short as possible or not at all. But in other words, I try to take care of all legal matters with the lawyers before you come in the morning, or deal with them after you leave for the day. But sometimes unanticipated issues come up, and I'm required to deal with those issues during the trial. So if you're chosen as a juror, please understand that I apologize for that, but sometimes it can't be helped, because it's so important for you as jurors to hear only the appropriate evidence that you should consider in deciding this case. Okay, so I hope you will understand if there are delays. I would suggest that you bring something to read if you're chosen as a juror, just so that there's something to occupy you in the event that there is a more than lengthy delay, which I don't anticipate, but might happen. Okay. All right, I'm going to give you some preliminary instructions. There are rules of law that apply in a criminal case. A complaint is not evidence. It creates no inference or presumption of guilt. No member of the jury should in any way be prejudiced against Ms. Potter because a complaint has been filed against her or because she is on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent. In order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt. The defendant does not have to prove her innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant until and unless the defendant has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt by evidence admitted in this trial. Now, a common misperception of the American criminal justice system is that the jury determines whether the accused person is guilty or innocent. That is not what American juries do in a criminal case. There is no such thing as an innocent verdict in American criminal law. The jury's verdict is either guilty or not guilty. Guilty means proved beyond a reasonable doubt. Not guilty means not proved beyond a reasonable doubt. To make sure that the defendant and the state receive a fair trial by an impartial jury, it'll be necessary for me and the lawyers to ask you questions. Remember that you will be under oath when you answer our questions, and that you must answer honestly. Now, the questioning is a very important part of the process. All of us hold personal opinions, and every one of us have had life experiences. The purpose of jury selection is to try to determine whether or not you hold certain opinions so strongly, or if something has happened to you or someone near and dear to you that would make it difficult for you to be fair and impartial in this type of a case. Put differently, those opinions or life experiences would basically prevent you from concentrating on only the evidence in this case and making your decision solely on the evidence presented. Please don't take offense to any questions that we ask you. Our goal is not to pry into your personal affairs. Our sole purpose and our obligation is to ensure that the jurors who decide this case are neutral, open-minded, and fair. Neutral means that before you hear all the evidence in this case, you're not leaning one way or the other on the issue of whether the state has proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Open-minded means that you're willing to listen to all the evidence and consider all the evidence before making your decision. Fair means that you will base your verdict on the evidence in this case and not on anything that is not presented in this case. Of course, we want you to bring your common sense to the jury room, but your verdict must be based on the evidence you hear during the trial. Now, your obligation is to answer the questions honestly and to tell us of anything, even if you're not asked, that might affect your ability to be neutral, open-minded, and fair. Now, some of you who are will be questioned will be excused. Please don't take offense. If you are excused, it doesn't mean that anybody thinks that you're not a fair person. So if you are excused, I hope you will understand. All right, panel members, at this point, please stand up and raise your right hand, and Mr. Kramer will administer the oath.
Do you affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror? If so, please say, I do.
All right, you may be seated. Okay. All right, panel members, I'm going to start with the group questions now. And remember, you don't have to answer orally, okay? Okay, the first question is, do any of you have serious concerns about your health if you were to serve as a juror in this case? If so, please raise your hand. No hands are raised. Does anyone on the panel have trouble understanding or hearing what I am saying? Please raise your hand. No hands are raised. Our system of law presumes the defendant guilty of the charges against her unless and until she has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt by evidence presented in this trial. The burden of proof is on the state. The defendant does not have to prove her innocence, and she is presumed innocent. Do you accept the principle that the defendant is presumed innocent and that the state has a burden of proof? If so, please raise your hand. All hands are raised. Does anyone disagree with that principle? Please raise your hand. No hands are raised. If you serve as a juror, I'll instruct you as to the law. You must follow the law as I give it to you, even if you believe the law is or should be different. Are you willing to do this? If so, please raise your hand. All hands are raised. If you're chosen as a juror, I'll instruct you that proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinarily prudent men and women would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt does not mean beyond all possibility of doubt. Does anyone disagree with that principle of law? Please raise your hand. No hands are raised. In arriving at your verdict, if you sit as a juror, the subject of penalty and punishment is not to be discussed nor considered by you. This is a matter that lies solely with the court within the limits prescribed by law. The subject of penalty or punishment must not in any way affect your decision as to whether or not the state has proved the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. Are you willing to follow this instruction? If so, please raise your hand. All hands are raised. Under our system of justice, the jury must decide the case solely on the evidence produced in court and the law that the judge instructs, and not because of bias, passion, prejudice, or sympathy. Would you be able to follow this instruction? If so, please raise your hand. All hands are raised. Now, there will be police officers who will testify in this case, as well as other witnesses. I'm going to give you some guidelines in determining whether a witness is believable or not believable. And, really it's basically a matter of common sense, but things to look at are, how did the witness appear? Did he or she seem honest and sincere? Will the witness gain or lose if the case is decided a certain way? Was the witness's testimony consistent with other evidence in the case? And, what was the witness's relationship to the parties? Would you be able to use these guidelines in deciding the credibility of a police officer just as you would any other witness? If so, please raise your hand. Okay, all hands are raised. Is there anyone here that would believe the testimony of a police officer just because he or she is in law enforcement? Please raise your hand. No hands are raised. Is there anyone here that would completely discount the testimony of a police officer just because of his or her position? No hands are raised. Do any of you know any of the lawyers involved in this case? Do any of you know the defendant? No hands are raised. And Attorney General Keith Ellison will also be representing the state. Does anyone know Mr. Ellison? Okay. Okay, we're going to start with opening statements on December 8th. Our best estimate is that we're going to be done by December 23rd. Now, I don't want you to worry about Christmas Eve or Christmas, because I intend to take Christmas Eve and that weekend off. And if we're not done, we'll start on Monday, December 27th. So I don't want you to worry at all that you're going to miss Christmas holidays with your family and friends. If you're selected as a juror, we'll start court at 9 o'clock and we'll go until 4:30 or 5. There'll be a 20-minute break in the morning, a 20-minute break in the afternoon, and we typically take an hour for lunch. Please remember that while court is in recess, you can't talk to anyone involved in this case, nor should you discuss the case among yourselves while you're in the waiting room or otherwise. You may see the parties or the lawyers in the hallways when you come in. Don't take offense if they don't stop to say hello or talk to you. Everyone involved in this case has been ordered to have no contact or communication with any member of the jury panel. Any violation of that rule could jeopardize the trial. That prohibition will continue until a verdict has been returned. All right, I'm done with the group questions, and I'm going to start individual questioning. I would like juror number 58 to remain in the courtroom, and will the remaining panel members follow the deputy to the waiting room? Thank you. Okay, juror number 58, will you please take the witness stand, the chair next to me? And you may remove your mask. Okay. Just a couple of follow-up questions, not very many. Ooh. My computer just went off. Sorry, Zach. Thank you. Oh. Every time he touches something, it gets fixed. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. It looks from your questionnaire that you really don't know very much about this case. Can you tell me what you've heard?
The only thing I've heard is I've seen, I think, the video maybe twice of just the part where the shooting happens and, she said taser, 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 and then said, oh no, I shot him. But that's pretty much all I've heard about the case. I've kind of tried not to look into it that much.
Okay. You realize anything that you've heard or seen outside of this courtroom is in evidence, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that if you're chosen as a juror, you can only consider the evidence that you hear in court and not consider anything else that isn't.
Yes.
Okay. In response to one of the questions, the question being, do you believe your community has been negatively or positively affected by any of the demonstrations that have taken place in the Twin Cities area in the last 2 years? Your response in the questionnaire was that I feel nothing has, I think it says changed.
Yeah, I guess I feel like I live far enough out that my community wasn't really impacted.
Okay.
I guess I haven't noticed where I live. I guess
Okay. What city do you live in?
Eden Prairie.
Okay. Your daughter's godfather is a St. Paul police officer?
Correct.
Okay. So I take it you're very good friends with him or her.
Yep. We just haven't seen enough of each other the last 2 years, but
Okay. But before that, you regularly saw, is it a her or a him?
it's a him.
Okay. So you have regular contact with him?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, we recently moved to Eden Prairie, so we don't see him as much as
All right.
before. But yeah,
Well, being the fact that you trusted him enough to make him
Mhm.
godfather, I take it you're real close.
yeah, he's an awesome guy.
Okay. I asked you a bunch of questions about the testimony of police officers and whether you could use your judgment in determining credibility and not give them more weight than other witnesses. And can you do that?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, even though you're like one of your close friends is a police officer.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, because police officers you recognize are different and they're all human beings, right?
No, yeah,
Okay.
I've heard some stories.
Yeah. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Just discussing not this case or anything. Just in the past, like he mentioned, there's just some police officers aren't, the best.
Okay.
But then he also has some really good friends. So I guess
All right.
I'm neutral on that whole thing.
Okay. Okay, you've been a victim of a crime. I think you've got very interesting writing. I think it
Yeah,
says
sorry,
theft.
I'm left-handed and.
I think it says theft.
Yeah, so I guess in college, just my wallet was stolen out of
All
my gym locker,
Okay.
but that's about it.
And you were satisfied with how the police responded?
Yes.
Okay. In response to the question, because law enforcement officers have such dangerous jobs, it's not right to second-guess decisions they make while on duty. You indicated that you strongly disagree with that. Can you explain why?
I think we're all just people, and just because you're in law enforcement, you shouldn't get extra leeway on your side. So I guess we should all be held accountable to our decisions.
Okay. In response to the question, do you believe our criminal justice system works? Why or why not? You wrote, it works with the laws in place, but the laws are not just. Could you elaborate on that?
I just feel like some laws impact certain groups more than others. So I mean, the way it's laid out now, I feel like it's working as a system, but there could always be changes made to the laws.
Do you have any laws in mind in particular?
No.
All right. Now, I'm going to give you the law that you have to apply.
Okay.
And you've got to apply that law whether or not you think the law is or should be different. Are you going to have a problem with that?
No.
Okay. In response to the question, is there a reason why you would not be able to give your complete attention to a trial during the time that this case is going to be tried? You just stated young child. Can you explain what your answer
yeah,
means?
I just have a 2-year-old toddler that, being, young and everything, just is in and out of daycare, just, with all the COVID shutdowns and everything. But I don't think it should be an issue. I've worked stuff out with my parents that they'd be able to take over and watch it during the day.
Okay.
Hate it.
Good. If you're chosen as a juror, will you be open-minded, fair, and neutral?
Yes.
Okay. And can you think of anything about yourself that I should know about or the attorney should know about that it would impact on your ability to be fair and impartial?
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay. And I think that's all the questions I have, so thank you.
Thank you.
Counsel?
Good morning, number 58.
Morning.
Earl Gray, Paul Lang, Kim Potter, and Amanda Montgomery are the lawyers. Obviously, Kim Potter is one on trial. Because the state has a burden of proof in this case, they go first. And not until they are complete can we present, our case. Would you be able to keep an open mind and wait until all of the evidence is in before you come to any conclusion?
Yes.
All right. You'd follow the law of the presumption of innocence and presume our client not guilty?
Yes.
And you'd require the state to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Is that right?
Correct.
And the judge at the end of the case will again define those rules and you'll follow them. Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Frank? Oh, excuse me. You need to... Okay. Mr. Frank?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Juror 58. Thank you for being here with us. And sorry to just refer to you by number, but that's just the way the system works. So sorry about that. I come third in line, so a lot of my questions have already been answered, and I have listened to your answers, and I appreciate them. I just have one thing I want to follow up on. In your answers, remember that chart
Yep.
with the different I agree and don't agree? There was, one where, you indicated about, and I want to just make sure I get this right, that, people don't give law enforcement officers the respect they deserve, and you indicated you strongly disagree with that.
Yes. So the question, I don't feel like they get the respect they deserve, and I
Right.
disagreed with that strongly. Correct?
Right.
Yeah, I guess at least in my community, I see police officers having a lot of respect, and then even my friend, who's a police officer, for the most part, he seems to feel like he gets the respect that he deserves.
Yeah. And yet, it seems like from knowing your friend, the police officer, they're people too, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to say yes.
Yes. Sorry.
It's a hard habit to break. But we'll work on it a little. And so that's why you wouldn't have any difficulty, is that why you would not have any difficulty evaluating a police officer's testimony the same as anybody else?
That is correct.
And the same way, with a former police officer on trial here, you would consider the evidence just apart from the fact that they had a uniform on at the time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And evaluate the evidence as it's presented here in court.
Correct.
Well, Juror 58, as I said, a lot of my questions were asked. So, if you could give me just a moment, please. Your Honor, may I have
Okay.
that? Thank you, Juror 58. I don't have any further questions, Your Honor. We passed the jury.
Okay, you're going to be a juror. We're going to start December 8th. You're going to get a call from the jury office just to confirm the date, time, and where you show up.
Okay.
Okay? So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, counsel, we have our jury. I want to thank both sides for being efficient in questioning, and I'm really glad we're on track to start when we're supposed to start. What I'll do is I'll send you a draft of the jury instructions as soon as I get them done. And I expect to be able to do that by the end of the day, okay? Then what we can do is you'll probably want to take a look at them, take some time to look at them. I'm thinking we can meet. Why don't we do this? Why don't we plan to meet Monday morning? Today is Friday, right? Why don't we plan to meet Monday morning? Let's say 9 o'clock. We'll go through the jury instructions. We'll have an answer for you on the autopsy photos. And we'll hopefully at that time be able to talk about objections to exhibits. Okay? So Monday morning, 9 o'clock. And then I'll rule on any remaining motions in limine on Monday. Okay. We'll probably take Tuesday off, assuming that we get everything done on Monday. If not, we can, reconvene and finish up whatever we didn't finish up on Monday, and so that we're starting Wednesday with any objections already ruled on. All stipulations agreed upon. Okay? Mr. Gray, did you want to say something?
Well, the motions in limine and objection to exhibits, we have a large amount of exhibits from the state, and we really appreciate the disc from them so we could get that done by Monday.
Okay. Any updates on when the disk or hard drive is going, what do you call this? That. All
I
right.
checked this morning, Your Honor, just before we came to court, before we came to the courtroom, and it looks like we're making pretty good progress on that. This will give me an opportunity to double check and hopefully get something to them by the end of the day. We'll work out the physical exchange of that.
Okay.
I can get a look at them today, so I think we're in good shape there.
Do you want to reconvene on Monday afternoon, or you think you'll be ready at 9 o'clock?
Monday afternoon, I think we'd be
Nine?
better.
What?
9 o'clock would be fine.
Okay. Okay. Let's just keep it at 9 o'clock. We can always, go into the afternoon if we're not done. Okay. All right.
If we get the exhibits, we don't really get if we get the exhibits today, or the disc, Monday morning would be fine, but if we don't get them today, Monday morning, we really wouldn't be prepared to do that. We might be prepared in the afternoon if we got them Monday morning.
Okay. Wait, Mr. Gray, we could work on jury instructions in the morning.
All right, good.
Okay. All right. Anything else of a procedural nature or legal nature? Okay, counsel. Have a good weekend, everyone. And we will see you Monday morning at 9 o'clock.
Well, just to be clear, we would waive Officer Potter's appearance for the jury charge procedure, if that is okay.
Okay. Well, we discussed this. We'll have in-chambers discussions about jury instructions, and Officer Potter has agreed that she won't be in attendance for that, correct? All right. And then, of course, we'll put everything on the record. Any objections to what I would consider the final instructions, we'll put everything on the record afterwards. All right.
Thank you.